Hi, everybody. We're going to get started in just a second. In the meantime, I have a little pre-webinar ritual I'd like you to indulge me with. The first part of it is I'd like you to have a moment of motion. As long as you're not in an open office, and nobody's in an open office these days, I'd like you to move for the next 60 seconds. Starting now, you can jog in place, march in place, dance, jump up and down, do jumping jacks, push-ups, wave your arms around, dance. I think I said dance before. Whatever, jump rope if you have one handy, whatever works. Yeah, but move, okay? Let's see. Keep moving, keep moving. And let me make Carly my co-host here. Okay, done. Keep moving. You have about 15 seconds more. And when you're finished with this moment of motion, I have another favor to ask. And that is that you share the webinar, news of the webinar with your friends who are applying to top MBA programs, and specifically those who are applying to Stanford GSB. I'm looking at the transcript here, and boy, is it off. Let's see if it doesn't do better. Otherwise, I will turn it off. Okay, your moment of motion is over. So again, if you could share news of the webinar, the link just got posted where they can register, or how can they access the webinar now. There's no need to register really. Let your friends know, send a text, post it on social media, send an email, carrier pigeon, whatever works, let them know about it. Okay, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever works, let them know about Get Accepted to Stanford. Once again, thank you everyone for joining me this morning for Get Accepted to Stanford. Oh, gee, I got the wrong, let's get the right slides up here. That's also going to help. Okay, now we're going to really get started. My name is Linda Abraham. I've been an innovator in MBA admissions consulting since launching Accepted.com in 1996. Accepted was one of the first MBA admissions consultancies on the web at the time. It's one of the first to host online chats, and later one of the first consultancies to present webinars like this one. It is a co-founder of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, and was one of the first companies to have an admissions-focused podcast, which is now one of the longest-running podcasts in this industry. And I'm looking forward to sharing my 25 plus years of admissions consulting experience with you today. Before we begin, I want to mention a few to-dos that will help you maximize your time here during the webinar, and one that will help us improve these webinars. The first one is, if you've not yet downloaded your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so. My personal suggestion is that you actually print it out. You can use it to follow along or take notes, whatever you prefer. And Carly just posted a link to the webinar worksheet if you have not already printed it out. You should have gotten an email about it, but again, if you didn't, there's the link. I'm going to ask several questions during the presentation and ask you to raise your hand in response to those questions. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon on your control panel. That's number two. We're going to use the question window for your questions. I've allotted time at the end of the Q&A at the end of the presentation for a Q&A, but you can post your questions in the question window at any time. Number four, I'm also going to ask open-ended questions in the course of the presentation. And please post your answers to my questions in the chat window. We use the question window for your questions and the chat window for your responses or comments. That allows me to go through your questions during the Q&A more easily and quickly, and therefore answer more of them. Number five, losing count here. You can win. We're going to have a contest towards the end of the webinar based solely on content presented during the webinar. So stay tuned, pay attention. I actually just last week, right before the July 4th holiday, I got a lovely email from somebody who won a free consultation, and he wrote me, I just wanted to let you know that I will be attending Michigan Ross this fall. I was considering applying this upcoming fall, in other words, the cycle that you folks are applying to, But listening to your webinars and then speaking with you directly because you won a free consultation with me, I took your advice about using this as an opportunity to get into a great school and went for it. And now I am thrilled, in caps, with where I am heading. I very much appreciate your guidance and support, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me. Happy 4th of July weekend and all the best. So that was number 5. That was a very nice perk to my week last week. When you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. We value your feedback. Now let's test your hand-raising skill. Please raise your hand if you are here because business school, and specifically the Stanford Graduate School of Business, will launch you on your career, on the route to the career of your dreams. So please, okay. Anybody, again, if Stanford is a school that's going to launch you on the route to the career of your dreams, please raise your hand. Click on that hand icon. Okay, well, most of you are here for the right reasons and have figured out how to use Zoom's hand-raising functionality. So congratulations. Oh, and one more thing, last housekeeping item and attendees' favorite, the fantastic offer for webinar registrants. $500 off accepted 1 or 2 school MBA application package, and $800 off a 3 or more school package. The coupon code is GSB for me. You can see the URL. You might want to jot that down on your worksheet. And this special ends July 13th. So you have till Monday, okay? So don't delay at the end of the webinar. Check this discount out, and I will also mention it at the end. I always like to get to know a little bit about my attendees at webinars. So right now, if you could tell me in the chat window where you're located, city and state if you're in the United States, city and country if you're outside the United States. Let's see, Chicago, Illinois, New Delhi, Lahore, Pakistan, London, India, Nairobi, Kenya, Delhi, India, Islamabad, Chennai, Ghana, West Africa, Mumbai, Kochi, India, Hyderabad, lots of people from India here. Boulder, Colorado, Thailand, Boston, Massachusetts, Atlanta, Georgia. Anybody from Los Angeles? That's where I am. Indonesia, Vancouver, Canada, Menlo Park, California, same state, San Francisco, Minneapolis, Houston, Texas, Chicago, Dallas, Montreal, Canada. Anybody from South America here? So far, I haven't seen it. Lima, Peru, okay. South Africa, London. I think we have all the continents but Antarctica. I think we also did have somebody from Australia. I'm not sure about Australia. Okay, great. Now that I know a little bit about where you are at geographically, highly international group, I'd like to know a little bit about where you're at in the application process. So we're going to post our first poll, and that poll, Carly, yeah, there it is. How committed are you to applying to Stanford? The options are definitely, probably, maybe, and doubt it, but I'd love you to convince me otherwise. Okay. We have 53% having voted. Can we get it up? We're 65%. Can we get it up? Again, the options are definitely, probably, maybe, and doubt it, but I'd love you to convince me otherwise. Okay, we're at 69% of you having voted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's end the poll. And the results are 58% definitely, 25% probably, 6% maybe, and 10% would love me to convince you otherwise. That's actually a large percentage for this one. All right, next poll. Thank you. Next poll is, I'm planning to apply in round 1, round 2, round 3, or later. In other words, a later application cycle. Again, the options are, I'm planning to apply round 1, round 2, round 3, or later. And we're with 70% having voted. I'd like to get it up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, close the poll. 77% having voted. It's 51% for round 1. That's great. 34% for round 2, 4% for round 3, and 11% for sometime later. We've actually been seeing lately more people attending these webinars who are over a year away from applying, but you're all welcome, and I think you'll find something of value, all of you, in this webinar. Okay, somebody else said round 1, round 2 in the chat window. Really? Okay. All right, let's keep going. It's cool. It's hip. It's Stanford. It's the most entrepreneurial of top MBA programs, with 15% of 2019 grads starting their own business at graduation. It's Stanford, at the heart of Silicon Valley's entrepreneurial ecosystem. It has a highly customizable program, small class size, and weather that can't be beat, except perhaps by my alma mater, UCLA. Now, the rest of this webinar will be devoted to helping you get accepted to Stanford. The plan for the rest of the webinar is to go through Accepted's 4-part framework and apply it to Stanford and Stanford's application. You can use the framework on other top MBA programs too, but the focus for this webinar will be Stanford. And the second part of the webinar, we're going to turn to tactics given Stanford's 2021 application. Now, I'm also going to, at different points in the webinar, issue warnings and caveats that you should be aware of. The first one is that you're not going to get to Stanford by using spin or a dab of makeup or waving a magic wand. It simply won't work. You can't fool them with cosmetics or magic. What you need to do is provide substance. And by substance, I mean a competitive qualifications and an effective presentation of those qualifications. In other words, you need to demonstrate fit. Your overriding aim is to show that you belong at Stanford. Now, in the chat window, please tell me, how do you intend to show you belong at Stanford? How do you intend to show you belong at Stanford? You must have, again, it's a very committed group. 90% of you are applying for sure. The overwhelming 83% of you, I think, are applying round 1. Tailor messaging to what Stanford wants to hear. That's definitely part of it. Obviously, it has to be authentic to you, but you do want to tailor it. That's correct. What else? My purpose is aligned with Stanford's purpose, and I can prove it by my historic, I'm going to guess the word that comes afterwards is behavior or experiences. From James, highlight my professional experiences and aspirations. Good. Part of it, definitely. Anybody else want to say what you intend to do? Show how I've pioneered innovation in my professional history. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, let's move on. On some level, my question was a little bit unfair because I'm going to take the next 45 minutes to answer my own question. And you have a little box and a few seconds to answer it. One of my goals for this webinar is to show you that one element is not enough, that you really need all 4 parts of the framework that we're going to discuss to get into Stanford and really to get into any competitive MBA program. So let's move on. The first part of the framework is demonstrate you can do the work and excel. And the easiest way to do so, the most common way, so the easiest way actually, is through your undergraduate transcript and test score. You want to be at or above, ideally, the averages for accepted students in both your grades and test scores. If not, and many people are not, at least one, how can you convince Stanford to accept you with below average? Let's start with grades. Realize that the average GPA for Stanford accepted students in 2019 was a 3.7. But by natures of the average, it means that some people were accepted with a 3.9 and some with a 3.5 and some probably with some numbers below that. But the farther away you are below average, and if both your grades and test scores are below average, the less likely it is you can effectively demonstrate you can do the work. Now, if you're concerned about your undergraduate GPA, please see, or I should say, listen to 5 A's for Your Low GPA. It's a podcast I did devoted exclusively to how to address and mitigate a low undergraduate GPA. Not specifically for Stanford, but the approach would be applicable at Stanford also. Now, one of the things that can mitigate the impact of a low GPA is a high test score, whether it's the GMAT or the GRE. This is particularly difficult at a school like Stanford, which happens to have extremely high test scores. So Stanford's overall average for the GMAT this past year was 734. Last year, this was 2019. For 2018, it was 732. For 2017, it was actually a whopping 737. And it has consistently had the highest average GMAT score of any US MBA program ranked by US News. The GRE is also very high, 165 on verbal, 165 on quant. Now, Stanford also provides the full range of scores for the entering class. And I would say that if your numbers are in the really low end of this range, you should strongly consider a retake. Unless everything else in your application is absolutely stellar and you probably have some diversity points in your profile. I suspect that these numbers will be slightly lower for 2020's entering class. We'll have to wait and see. And I suspect they will go up again for the 2021 entering class. I'm anticipating a competitive application cycle. If you're not sure whether to retake or not, we have a couple, again, some resources for you. We'll be sending out these URLs after the webinar. One is a short video, and the other is a full-blown webinar where I give basically criteria for who should retake, under what circumstances, etc. But somehow, some way, you have to show that you can do the work effectively and not struggle with either basic math or communications. That's part one of the framework. Part two, have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA from Stanford GSB and how you intend to use it. Now, so the main reason this is important is because Stanford asks about it in several different places and in several different ways. First of all, you have this kind of statistical way that Stanford can track where its applicants want to go. And I think that's these boxes here are mostly, let me just get a spotlight, it'll make things a little easier. These right here are mostly for statistical purposes. And then you have Stanford's SA2, why Stanford, which really will relate to your goals. And that's a very common question in essays. Many schools have it. If not, then it'll probably come up in your interview. And then Stanford also asks this short essay question, please write a sentence or two about what you aspire to do after graduating from Stanford GSB. Now, it's a short question, 255 characters. That's very short, 1 or 2 sentences. But it's a really important one. In an information session that I attended several years ago, the presenter, the admissions committee member, emphasized that they want their graduates to achieve unimaginable levels of greatness. And that's her words, not mine. You know, the big, hairy goals. That's what they're looking for. They should be somewhat grounded in what you've done and the Stanford MBA program. But don't be afraid when you answer this question here to write what you aspire to do and how you intend to have a major impact on either organizations or the world. Again, it can have more to do with what you hope to do or accomplish or contribute. And it should not be just a repetition of what's in the lower 2 boxes of what you want to immediately do upon earning your MBA. Keep in mind those insane level of greatness. Now, let me ask you, and if you could respond in the chat window, why are goals important to the schools or to Stanford specifically? Why do they care about what you intend to do after you leave this school and finish paying their tuition? Anybody want to respond to that one? To form an effective class, no ROI, is part of it. to see if those goals align with Stanford's program mission. That's definitely a part of it. Check if your profile fits with theirs. Yeah. Alumni network, that's part of it. I think there's a really, really basic reason for that. I think you're all hitting on kind of cherries as opposed to the cake. Your actions are a direct representation of the school's culture and legacy, right? They want to make sure you're a solid investment, good press, strong alumni. That's much closer. They want to know where you're going so they can assess whether they can help you succeed in getting there. If you don't know what you're going to do, what you want to do, there's no way for them to know if they can help you succeed, or whether you can be a great representative of the Stanford brand afterward and a good member of the alumni network and frankly donate a lot of money later. They just will have no idea. Admissions should be able to connect the dots between where you've been and where you want to go via Stanford's program, career strengths, and extracurricular opportunities. So that's part 2 of the framework. Have a goal that requires a Stanford MBA. Part 3, show that you have what Stanford seeks. Now, Stanford's motto is change lives, change organizations, change the world. Can you show that you have been a change agent? It's much easier to show that you will be one if you've been one in the past. Are you open to change in your own life? This is a critical point in taking advantage of a transformational experience, and that's what how Stanford looks at its MBA program. You have to be willing to be transformed. In my mind, the defining characteristic of Stanford students is a willingness to take initiative when they saw a need, a willingness to solve problems, a willingness to offer solutions. In a word, initiative. Not the pass, overlook all the problems that you see, but to take initiative and address not necessarily all problems, but certainly some that you see you can have a major impact on and that are very important to you. So that's, just in terms of Stanford's motto, I think they have it on every page of their website. I think they're very serious about it. And if you think about the questions they ask throughout the application, you'll see that it has to do with being a change agent, taking initiative to be a change agent. Now, in addition, Stanford lists 3 criteria in terms of how they evaluate your applications. The first element in their 3 criteria, the first criterion, is intellectual vitality. And this is not just good grades or high test scores. They're looking for curiosity and an openness to learning new things. And that intellectual vitality or curiosity can be evident in the classes you took, the minors you had, perhaps your current interest in a dual degree program, or simply other interests and hobbies that you enjoy. They don't want to see a checklist or treadmill approach to life. So that's the first of their criteria. The second criterion is demonstrated leadership potential. Whoops. And yeah, they also, I forgot that one. They want to see a genuine interest in expanding intellectual horizons under that intellectual vitality. But getting back to demonstrated leadership potential, they want to see that you have led. It has to be demonstrated. It can't just be a promise for the future. The key word is demonstrated. What results have you achieved? How many people did you motivate or empower on your way to achieving these results? Assistant Dean and Director of MBA Admissions at Stanford, Kirsten Moss, earned a doctorate in psychology with a focus on organizational leadership. Guess what's important to her? Leadership. Now, a key GSB assumption, and this is at most MBA programs, is that past actions usually are the best predictor of future behavior. So throughout the application, with the exception of asking about your goals, but throughout the application, you're going to see behavioral questions. And we'll discuss that later on, and it also will come up in the interview. For Stanford and for most business schools, leadership implies a willingness to accept responsibility for a particular outcome and motivating others. It implies integrity and strength of character. Stanford likes to talk about directed idealism. In other words, behavior that reflects your ideals. So that's number 2, right? Demonstrated leadership potential. The third criterion is probably the hardest to grasp, and that's personal qualities and contributions. your individual perspective and ability to contribute uniquely to the class at Stanford. And as Stanford writes, to understand how you will contribute to the Stanford community, we'd like to know who you are, not simply what you've done. Your values, beliefs, identity, passions, experiences, and ambitions will help shape the perspective of your classmates and enrich our community. I think this is by far the most difficult to grasp and subjective of Stanford's criteria. Superficiality and canned responses will hurt and possibly kill your chances of acceptance, but authentic individuality, not weirdness, poses much less of a risk than uniformity. There's a real big difference as you're trying to think about these personal contributions, and we're going to develop this more. There's a real big difference between mouthing platitudes or spitting back phrases like intellectual vitality, personal contributions, demonstrate leadership potential. If you just mouth those terms or include them in your essays, that's not really showing them that you have those qualities or that you share those values of, change lives, change organizations, change the world. If you repeat that, I don't care how many times you repeat it, it's not going to show them anything. They know the phrase. It's just playing some magic trick or trying to play one or putting on makeup. It doesn't really change the substance. It doesn't demonstrate any substance. But examples in your essays, meaningful, concrete, credible bullet points in your resume, how you write your job descriptions, what you put in the boxes, that all comes together to show that you meet Stanford's criteria, that you can make that personal contribution, that you have that distinctive perspective. So the information in your application boxes, letters of recommendation, and your responses to interview questions must all demonstrate these qualities. And at this point in the webinar, I'd like you to write down for yourself, you can use your worksheet or back of an envelope or a computer file if you want, ways in which you have demonstrated the qualities that Stanford is looking for. Again, the qualities we're talking about are intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, and personal characteristics and contributions. So you don't have to spit back the phrases at all. You really must be able to look in the mirror and reflect the individual you see, the individual human being you see throughout the application. And yes, give yourself a hand of applause too, a round of applause. Another warning. If you focus on rankings or Stanford GSB brand, Silicon Valley, Google, Nike, HP, etc., you'll almost for sure be obscuring this fit aspect of admissions and focusing on the wrong things such that you'll blend in instead of standing out. They can take the claim for top 10, top 20, but you want to stand out in a distinctive way. You want to show that you have distinctive experiences and perspective to contribute. When I attended the AGAC conference in May, virtually of course, we had breakout rooms, breakout sessions, and one session was called Build a Class. And in this breakout session, I think there were 4 admissions consultants and 4 school representatives, one of whom was from Stanford. We were each given profiles of different MBA applicants, anonymized, and told that we could choose 3 of them, 1 to admit, 1 to reject, and 1 to waitlist. And we went through them. It was interesting. It was very good exercise. But what was interesting was the admissions committee members said they really had a hard time with the exercise because they didn't know what the rest of the applicant pool was and what the already admitted students were. So again, this whole point of having something distinctive to contribute, this distinctive perspective, the ability to contribute, it's the part of the process that they're creating a class, and it is a really big part of the process. Again, we're going to touch on this later. And Stanford has lots of applicants, and it can be choosy. As I'm sure you all realize, it has the lowest acceptance rate of any US MBA program. And that leads to my last strategic point. I've kind of been building up to it. Demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute distinctively to your class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud that they will have admitted you. All right, so we already discussed the need for a distinctive, for an individual perspective. And And we've discussed it in relationship to Stanford's third criteria, right? Personal characteristics and contribution. A lot of the third criterion has to do with how you will help form the class, how you will add, how will your experience and perspective enrich the class and alumni network down the road. And this is not just a matter of perspective or thoughts. You also need to have a track record as a contributor, a person who's made a difference, right? Change lives, change organizations, change the world. You need to show that you've had impact in the past through your essay, resumes, the optional essays, activity history, etc. And this is closely related to Stanford's value as reflected in that motto, because past behavior predicts future behavior. So, do you have the work experience quantitatively and qualitatively, which is actually the important part, that will allow you to contribute in Stanford's MBA class? Have you made contributions? Have you made a difference on the job? Have you had increasing responsibility? Have you been entrusted with more responsibility? All that shows that you'll have something to contribute. You've contributed in the past. And then there's community service. Have you made a contribution through community service? Now, you don't have to participate or assume a leadership role in any of these existing organizations. You may find it more meaningful to you to found a new organization, start a new initiative or group to meet a specific need in your community, however you define your community. Again, I'm saying, I know I've repeated myself here. Have you been a change agent in the past? That's what they're going to be looking for. And what I'd like you to do now is give me some examples of when you have been a change agent, and I'll comment on them. If you can do that in the chat window, I'll comment on them, and we'll go from there. Okay, here are some examples that I made up myself. Managed to get out the vote drive that had unprecedented success, but I would want to know how you quantify that success. Developed an app to help cancer patients deal with friends and relatives who want to help, but are actually inundating the cancer patient and his or her family. Working in supply chain management, you analyze data and realize a way to cut transportation costs and time to market by 10%. Okay, so let's see what you guys have come up with. Organize a women in tech luncheon for my company and a close client. Okay, Kayla, how many women attended the event? How many women went into tech or were in tech? And what did you discuss? What was the impact of the event? I started a new venture, says Kumala, to reduce plastic waste. Great. How much have you reduced waste? Where? How many people are participating? How many people are assisting you? Help set up a new team. How many people are on the team? What is the impact of the new team? Volunteer in managing national election execution for the last 10 years. Great. That's a very good example. Again, are you leading anybody as you've done this for 10 years? Are you now head of some group? I'd like to know that. Matthew says increase membership and engagement for a local alumni charter. I assume that means chapter. Very good. By what percentage did you increase membership? How do you define engagement and how did you increase it? How much did you increase it by and how did you increase it? So what I'm trying to show you here is that you need to be much more concrete, specific about your achievements, and you need to quantify both your responsibilities and impact whenever possible. I'd also like to do a couple of polls here, if possible. Let's start with the first one. How many of you work in, okay, here we go. Okay, how many of you work in high tech, for Pinterest, or none of the above? Okay. Again, the options are how many of you work in high tech, for Pinterest, and none of the above. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the poll was 73% having voted, 27% are in high tech, and nobody works for Pinterest. Okay, 73% and none of the above. The next poll, please. You can share the results first. I'm sorry. Share the results first. Next poll is traveled outside of your home. How many of you have traveled outside of your home country, trekked in New Zealand, or none of the above? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I saw that. All right. So we're at 63%. Can we get it up? Again, the options are traveled outside your home country, trekked in New Zealand, and none of the above. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can end the poll. And 100% of you have traveled outside your home country. That's fantastic. And 11% have trekked in New Zealand. It's a little bit higher than this morning's group. Okay, that's great. And the last one of these polls, how many of you have volunteered in college or since college, started a support group for siblings who have lost siblings as children and young adults, or none of the above? Again, how many of you have volunteered in college or since college, started a support group for siblings who have lost siblings as children and young adults, or none of the above? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, with 66% having voted. 95% of you have volunteered. 0% of you started this support group, and 5% or none of the above have not volunteered at all in college or since. What's the difference between the first and second question in each of the last 3 polls? In the chat window, please. Second is more concrete. Okay, it's more, okay, anybody else? It's specific, exactly. That was the word, broad versus specific. That's right, James, Kayla, that's exactly what I was looking for. And what happens when I ask more specific questions? When I ask general questions, a lot of you could be, raise your hands. But when I got specific, what happened? Fewer people, right? Right. It became much more distinctive. It was, you were differentiated. Exactly. Maximiliano, you got it. You differentiate yourself when you speak or write in specifics about yourself. Do you see how specifics differentiate? So when you describe what you do, are you a financial analyst or a forensic financial analyst? Are you an engineer or a biomedical engineer or a civil engineer or a chip design engineer? Are you a consultant or a healthcare consultant? Did you volunteer or did you found a new organization to address a specific need in your community? However you define your community. Focus on the specifics will allow you very naturally to stand out and will help you reveal yourself as a unique individual you truly are, who can contribute something distinctive to a class at Stanford GSB. Now, why is distinctive contribution important? Well, for one thing, as we've discussed, it's one of Stanford's stated criteria, right? The third one. But there's another reason, and this applies to other programs too. Admissions at top-tier MBA programs is really a two-step process. There's evaluation, determining the qualified, and there are always too many qualified at schools like Stanford. And then there's selection, crafting a class, determining which candidates to admit among those evaluated as highly qualified. This is, again, the other source, and it's closely related, I think, to the personal contributions one, that makes the process rather opaque and somewhat subjective. It's not just about stats, quite clearly. What's the implication for you as an applicant of the selection part of the process? The implication is that Stanford has no reason to admit someone without something distinctive to contribute, or someone who is not a change agent, someone lacking a record of past impact and contribution, no matter what your stats. That's important to realize. Stats might get you to the door, but they're not going to carry you over the threshold. Now let's review the 4-part framework you need to think about before and while putting your application together. Number 1, demonstrate you can do the in-class work and excel. Number 2, have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA from Stanford and how you intend to use it. Number 3, show that you share Stanford's values and meet its criteria. And number 4, demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute to class discussions, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud to have admitted you. Now, let's look at the specific elements of the Stanford GSB application. I've already touched briefly on grades and transcripts, as well as GSB's values. Let's look at the other elements. First, job and activity history and the resume. Be succinct. The resume should be no more than one page, as strongly suggested by Stanford. When you're writing your resume, focus on achievements in your resume, not your responsibility descriptions. Again, we're not looking for a check the box kind of approach here. We want people who've been change agents, who've made a difference. That's going to be evidenced by your achievements. As I mentioned before, don't treat the forms and boxes as throwaway. They are very important. Even though the box will ask you for your primary job responsibilities, let your achievements reveal how you went beyond what was required of you. And the reason for leaving, 145 characters, hopefully the best reason for leaving is greater opportunity and more responsibility. For the community service description, it's very similar advice. You want to quantify your impact whenever possible. And for all activities, Stanford gives you 300 characters to describe the activity interest, your role, your impact, or contribution. This theme is just coming over and over and over again. Use it. And again, be as concrete and specific, quantify whenever possible. Let's move on to the essays. Stanford has 2 required essays and several optional essays. The required essays, they give you a word limit of 1,050 words total for the 2 essays that you can allocate as you wish. They recommend 650 for essay A and 400 for essay B. Now, the essay should complement the other elements of the application, answer the questions posed, and reveal something distinctive and interesting about you. They are great places for you to show fit with Stanford, change lives, change organizations, change the world, to demonstrate those 3 criteria, at least some of them, to reveal the person behind those achievements, if you recall that quote, and portray yourself as a thoughtful change agent, a values-driven, purpose-driven change agent. Demonstrate that individual perspective that comes under the 3rd criterion. Now, Stanford's signature essay question, essay number 1, what matters to you most and why? Suggested length is 650 words for essay A, 100 words down from last year. In my opinion, this is the hardest MBA essay question because you really need to think about what is important to you, why, and how has it guided your actions, the way you spend your time. What are your priorities, really and truly? We find that those who answer this question in a way that shows initiative and an I care attitude do well in the admissions process. And don't forget to answer the why part of the process of the question. Stanford's essay 2, or B, is why Stanford, and they recommend 400 words for that, for your response. You need to know 2 things in order to respond well here. First, you need to know why you want to pursue an MBA. And this is almost always tied to goals and aspirations, briefly mentioned in the employment section. Saying you can't stand your current job is not going to get you in. Now, you may want to, again, define your short-term goal, but you don't really have to. The question, just for the essay, you might need to do it. How will Stanford help you to achieve the results you want to achieve? That's the key question. And you need to know what you want to achieve in order to answer here, to respond to the essay question. You can include longer-term goals or aspirations if relevant, and if you have them, I would definitely encourage you to include them. If it isn't obvious why an MBA will help you to advance towards your goal, explain your reasoning, make your case. Don't give it up, because a distinctive goal can actually help you get accepted as long as it's feasible. And the second thing you need to know is Stanford's program. How are you going to take advantage of its tailored curriculum, diverse teaching methods to get the education you want, get the experience you want that will prepare you to achieve your goals? And don't just, again, blather on about, the outstanding location or something like that. Get specific. And don't talk about the programs that Stanford has in common with, like the core, okay, with all other MBA programs. Talk about things that are specific to Stanford, if not unique. The D School, its strength in entrepreneurship, if it's relevant to your goals. the way you can customize the program to suit your needs, because Stanford's program is highly customizable. This is not a question about brand or ranking. Then, given your past experiences in education, how you take advantage of Stanford GSB's transformative opportunities and program to achieve your goals. What it shouldn't be an ode to the wonderful faculty, unparalleled career opportunities, and fantastic peers, because again, you can say that about any top program. Specifics count. Now, think of what we've been discussing here in terms of Stanford's motto and its criteria. You should be able to relate these questions, especially A, but really both of them, either to the motto or the criteria. In terms of how to approach these essays, an anecdotal response can really work for both of them, but especially essay A. Tell a story incorporating what you did, how you did it and felt, and the impact of what you did on others and on you. And again, remember the why part of essay A. You can start with an anecdote that epitomizes your values and shows you living that value, and then discuss the influences that cause you to pursue that path, as well as the impact you had on others and that experience had on others and on you. Or you can start with an influential moment in the past that made you realize the importance of whatever is important to you, and then bring it forward. So the why is answered automatically, and yet you again show that you actually live your values. Stanford also has several optional essay questions. They are genuinely optional. I recently attended a webinar with Kirsten Moss through AGEC. It was a presentation for admissions consultants. And she was quite clear that they admitted people who responded to the optional question, and they admitted people who didn't respond to the optional question. And they also rejected people in both groups. It's not an automatic admit or automatic reject. It depends what you say, who you are, what you've done. I personally think that these optional questions are opportunities for you to show more demonstrated leadership potential, which is one of Stanford's stated criteria. Again, Kirsten Moss said she's a data junkie. This is data for her. This is information for her to better evaluate your demonstrated leadership potential. If you have it, you have something worthwhile to say and share, then do so. In responding to these very short questions, right? 1,200 characters, approximately 200 words, or providing these very brief examples, a CAR approach can be extremely effective. CAR C-A-R, stands for challenge. What was the situation or challenge you faced that motivated you to lead and take responsibility or to create positive impact? What did you do to address the situation? And what were the results, both for you and others who experienced the impact you had? And then there's also a new optional question. Tell us about a time within the last 3 years when your background influenced your participation at work or school. We know that each person is more than a list of facts or predefined categories. We are interested in how your background may have influenced your life experiences. And as far as background, they're looking at work, education, skills, interests, culture, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, where and how you grew up. Just about anything fits under background, but how has it influenced your participation? So I'd like to highlight a few elements here. Number one, they're looking for something that happened in the last 3 years. They don't want to know what happened when you were in junior high. Two, they're looking at participation and considering taking an active role. And three, how does your background and identity influence your behavior and actions? There's a consistency here. I hope you're seeing it. Additional information. Through all of the elements of your application, we believe that we get to know you well. Complete this section only if you have critical information you could not convey elsewhere on your application. That could be extenuating circumstances affecting academic or work performance. Do not include essays, and please be brief. So what would be extenuating circumstances? You got sick and your grades dipped. You got laid off because of COVID and you're now unemployed. Those would be the kinds of things that you could address in this section. There's no word limit, but you better be succinct. If you're not, you'll be showing a lack of judgment, and that's not what you want to be showing. What about letters of recommendation? Stanford wants two. One preferably is from your current direct supervisor or next best alternative at work. It should definitely be from somebody who has supervised your work, and they suggest that you choose an individual who can best represent your potential impact. The second reference can be from a non-professional organization which you've been involved, but Stanford seems to prefer work. So it's again, it's a judgment call. This is something that we would discuss with our clients. Both can be from the same organization, but I wouldn't want it like from the same project. My two criteria for recommenders: one is that the recommenders should be people who know you well in a professional setting. Yes, it can be a volunteer setting, but it has to be one where you are, again, assuming responsibility. Ask, and then the second one is that the recommender be willing and able to write a strong, positive letter of recommendation for you, and ask them. If they hesitate, move on and ask somebody else. You also want to encourage your recommenders to write in specifics, concrete examples, to focus on initiative, leadership, your impact, and innovation. We have here on the screen 10 tips for recommenders. This is something you can give your recommenders. I would, in addition to this, give them a copy of your resume and perhaps a short summary of achievements that you want them to remember, if not explicitly highlight, as well as Stanford's criteria so that they know what they should be emphasizing. What about interviews? Well, if you're lucky enough to interview, congratulations. Your chances of acceptance have gone up dramatically. Interviews at Stanford are usually conducted by alumni. They are blind, meaning that the interviewer only knows what's in your resume. They do not have access to your entire application. And they are usually behavioral. Tell us about a time when you did X or when you dealt with Y. Because, as I've said before, Stanford believes that past behavior predicts future behavior. How can you prepare for your Stanford interview? Well, first of all, review Stanford's MBA interview page. It has excellent advice. I'd also take a look at GMAT Club and Beat the GMAT threads before you interview to see if there's any worthwhile advice there. You want to read blogs with applicants who have interviewed if you can find them. There are fewer out there today than there used to be, but you might still find some. Review your application before you interview because that has the best stories that you wanted to put before the Stanford committee. If there's anything that happened since you applied and the date of your interview, be prepared to highlight that in your interview. Be prepared to explore your past experiences to show fit with Stanford's values and criteria. And that was one of the things one of you folks mentioned in response to my first question. Ahead of time, what I suggest you do is take a piece of paper or a spreadsheet, identify experience, and on the left, set two columns, right? Left hand should be the qualities you want to display in the interview, right? Leadership, initiative, creativity, intellectual vitality. Jot them down on the left, and on the right, list the experiences that you've had that demonstrate those qualities. And then on a separate piece of paper or a separate worksheet, if you're doing this on the computer, in your first column, jot down some of the things you're really proud of, including perhaps some things that were not included in the application because they took place after the application or you just didn't have room for them. And write which of Stanford's key qualities, which of Stanford's criteria those experiences reveal. And thirdly, prepare questions to ask the alum about his or her experience both at Stanford as an alumnus. Because part of the interview is about letting you get to know a little about the GSB community. Now let's go back to your goal in submitting an application for Stanford. Okay, again, let's go through the framework. Show you can do the work in Excel. Have a goal that requires an MBA from Stanford. Show that you meet Stanford's criteria and share its values. And demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute distinctively to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud to have accepted you. Now's the time for our fun contest, okay? Again, the winners of the contest will win a free 15-minute consultation. And it says accepted consultant, but it will be with me. So the first three to answer this question get that consultation. And I'd like you to respond in one window, okay? What are Stanford's 3 key admissions criteria? Again, all in one window. The first 3 of you to get all 3 in one window get the consultation with me. Okay, Chaitanya got it. Yuri, no. No, no. Kayla, you got it? And and Matthew, you got it. Okay, Carly, you have it? Great, thank you. Okay, so again, the 3 R, some of you got part of them, but you didn't get all of them. The 3 are intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, and personal qualities and contributions. Final word of, well, not quite, not really final, almost final. Word of advice. The admissions committee readers are sharp, intelligent professionals. Don't try to craft, fake, or cover up. That dab of makeup won't do it. The best presentation of you for Stanford is an authentic reflection of your achievements and dreams, keeping in mind the 4-part framework that will persuade Stanford to want you. Now, at this point in the webinar, I'd like to ask you to share with me in the chat window what was the most valuable concept, idea, or piece of advice you heard so far in today's webinar. In the chat window, please. Roger, we'll send out a link to the recording, okay? The framework as a whole, now I have a clear sense of how to use my application, real estate. Oh, that I'm so happy with that one. Specific contributions, good one. Resume specificity is so important, great. Fit within the class, demonstration of leadership, good. Okay, anybody else? Be an agent of change, good. How to showcase your achievements in terms of impact and specificity, wonderful, Disha. Understanding application as a whole sum of its parts, perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to get across. Okay, this is great feedback. Thank you, everybody. The goal for this webinar is showing you that all 4 elements of this framework are needed for acceptance to Stanford GSB, not just 1 and not just 3 out of 4. Because to get accepted, you need to show that you both belong at Stanford, that's parts 1 through 3, and stand out in the applicant pool, that's part 4. Now, I've given you the what of a successful application. What you need now, however, is the how applied to your individual circumstances. I've told you what should be there. The question is, how are you going to put it into your application? For that kind of critical advice, you need to get accepted and work with one of our outstanding consultants. Your consultant will guide you in showing that you both belong at Stanford or whatever MBA program you're aiming for and stand out in the applicant pool. He or she will guide you in creating an application that as a whole spotlights your strengths and mitigates your weaknesses, an application that really accomplishes everything we've discussed here today. Here's what you can do when you work with Accepted. You can access expertise and experience, reduce your stress, save time, optimize your school choice and application, and mitigate weaknesses. Now, some may say Accepted is expensive, and we're definitely not a cheap service because of the quality of our staff. However, there are expensive risks associated with not investing in Accepted. Reapplication can easily cost a couple $1,000s, especially if you have to retake GMAT or GRE. You could have 1 additional year of pre-MBA earnings, and that can cost in the 5 figures easily. There's a potential that you could have gotten into a better program with lifelong higher earnings and network, and that could cost you in 5 or 6 figures. Now, every year we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided, after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected, that they wanted to work with us. That's fine with us. We're happy to work with you whenever you come to us. But they would have been better off investing in Accepted's guidance the first time around, and so would you. But enough from me. What do Accepted's clients say? Well, one client story, our client had a below average for Stanford stats and other challenges. Natalie Greenblatt Epstein, accepted consultant and former admissions director at 3 programs, worked with him closely. What did he have to say? I'm really excited to be going to Stanford. In all the interviews I had, there wasn't a single question that I wasn't ready for. I owe a large part of my success to her, meaning Natalie. Or this feedback from a different client who worked on the Stanford application with Michelle Stockman. I'm in at Stanford GSB. Thank you for your pivotal support. I really believe you made a significant impact on my application and acceptance. Very different people and challenges, same result as Stanford. Now, I can't promise that that you're going to get accepted to Stanford, and I can't say that all our clients are accepted to Stanford, but we'd sure like to make that significant impact and guide you to acceptance. It's now July, and there is time before Stanford's round 1, September 15th, 2020 deadline to work with us. Contact us ASAP, and we'd be happy to help you from scratch or review and edit your essays. Our goal is to guide you so that you present all 4 parts of this critical framework and show that you both belong at Stanford and are a standout in the applicant pool. And that's what we did for the clients you just heard from. And if you purchase by July 13th, there's also time to take advantage of these great discounts that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. $500 off a 1 or 2 school application package and $800 off a 3 or more school package. Coupon code GSB for me, and this special ends July 13th, 2020. And now let's take your questions. I know they've been coming in. It's time for the Q&A. Okay, here. So anonymous, what I'm gonna, in case you like to know what I look like, I'm gonna actually put on the video. And I may, if unmute some of you so that we can have a, yeah, okay. So we can have a dialogue in case there's need for follow-up, okay? All right. So the first question is from an anonymous attendee. What is the difference between round 1 versus round 2? The main difference is round 1, the class is entirely open. All seats are available. Round 2 usually has the biggest number of applicants, though it's, and otherwise there really isn't significant difference between the two. I suggest you apply as in the earliest round possible, provided, this is a big provided, you don't compromise the quality of your application. That's my advice on that one. Let's see. All right, Schelling Sock asks, again, I apologize if I mispronounce name. Should I take the GMAT rather than GRE? Take the test that you're going to do best on. All right, you saw the slide at the beginning. I'm not going to try and find it now, but it was a slide that gave the averages. Take a practice test in both the GMAT and the GRE. Many test prep companies offer them. And wherever you are close to Stanford's average numbers or perhaps above them, take that test. Stanford is agnostic. Okay. Okay. Solomon asks, is there a difference between MBA and MSX admissions process at Stanford? Which program is best at Stanford, MBA or MSX? There are some differences between the process, but they're minor. I believe at this point, MSX is using the same application, but double check that. I haven't checked it recently. The main difference is the Stanford MBA is a 2-year program. The MSX is roughly 1 year, and the MSX is aimed at being for more experienced leaders, it's called. It's technically an MS in leadership. It's typically people 35 and up. So if you're in that group, you're probably going to benefit more from the MSX, where the MBA is more for people in their mid to late 20s and early 30s. Again, it's not, there definitely is overlap, but that's the main differences. Will a recording of this webinar be available later? Yes. We'll send you a link to it. Somebody's asking, can you discuss GSB's intake percentage in each round? Um, I don't have the data on that. I've never seen that data, so I can't intelligently discuss it, certainly in terms of numbers. I understand that for most years, round 1 and 2 are the rounds that get the most applications. Um, round 3 is typically much smaller. This past year probably was different, but that's typical. Okay, Lena is asking, thanks so much for doing this webinar. You're very welcome. My question is on what matters to you most and why essay. How much of the why should one get into? The whole why question is tough to explain because how am I supposed to explain why equal access to educational opportunities matters to me? Maybe it's because I think it'll create a happier world, then am I expected to explain why I want a happier world? Am I not getting this right? I don't think you need to explain why you want a happier world. I do think you do need to explain perhaps uh, why this particular cause engages you, matters to you. Are you a teacher? Again, you don't have to answer this online, but that would be, how is it appealing to you? That I think is where you'd have to go with it. Okay. For the impact essays, how far back can we go? They go, the optional impact essays, you can go back 3 years. Okay, anonymous attendee asks, if I have not done community service in recent years, what are my options? Well, you have basically 2 options. You can start doing something or you can continue to do nothing. My recommendation would be that you start doing something. It can be something that's obviously important. It should be something that's important to you. It can be something through your work. It can be something in your community. It can be something through a religious institution if you identify with one. It can be through an ethnic organization if you identify with one. But you should start doing something. That would be my recommendation. The other option is to continue doing nothing and hope they won't care. But I would suggest you do something. And I suggest you do something, start doing something, because I think that oh, actually, I was going to let you folks see me at this point. Okay, there you go. So if you wonder what I look like, now you know. Hello, everybody. The main reason I would suggest you start doing something is even if you apply round 1, you're going to have roughly 3 months at the time of your application. By the time you get interviewed, if you're lucky enough to get interviewed, you'd have 5 or 6 months of activity and engagement. If you're waitlisted, you could have 6 to 9 months of engagement in this activity. If you have to reapply, which I know nobody wants to think about, but it is a possibility, suddenly you'd have a year of participation, leadership, impact in this activity. So I would say better late than never, get going. Okay, Disha asked about GMAT versus GRE, and I already answered that one. Anonymous attendee asks, can strong graduate school grades help make up for weaker undergraduate school GPA? The answer is yes. Obviously, as usual, the details and specifics count. I don't know how low the undergraduate grades were and how high the graduate grades were. That also matters. And of course, the GMAT or GRE will matter. But the short answer to that question is yes. Yes. Any recommendations for the older applicants, 30 plus? A few recommendations. And actually, Carly, do you want to post the link to the MBA article for older applicants? A couple of recommendations. One, you have to be very clear on why you want an MBA now, not just why you didn't get earlier, but why now. I think you need to address any possible concerns that you're going to be relying on their career services center for a job if you possibly can. In other words, if you're, let's say, returning to a family business, make that quite clear so they know that you're not going to be relying on their career services center to look for you for a job. And the third thing would be to consider Stanford MSX if you do have the requisite leadership experience and numbers of years of experience. So there's some answers for that. And I see that Carly posted the applying as an older applicant for you. Okay, does Stanford provide any financial aid? How can one better their chances of getting a scholarship? Yes, Stanford does provide financial aid. It rarely provides a full ride, except for the Reliance scholarship. There's also Knight Hennessy, so I shouldn't say that. But other forms of financial aid, and by that you mean, we're talking now about scholarship dollars, it usually means that they are so impressed by you that they think you're going to make them look good. And that can be by having above average GMAT score. That's one way. It can be through really, really impressive achievements on the job. And when I say this, realize that the applicant pool is already very impressive. So it's a hard task to do. But basically, getting to a point where they really want you because you're going to make them look good is the best way to get a scholarship, a merit scholarship. Okay. For B-School applications, there's such an emphasis on community service. What do you do if you haven't contributed recently? You start now. I kind of did that one already. You're welcome, Lena. Okay, this is a really interesting question. And again, considering the international nature of our audience, it's particularly relevant. This is from Sai. So Sai, I'm going to try and unmute you. If you don't want to be unmuted, just don't talk. No problem. Hi, Sai. You there?
Hi, Linda. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Do you want to ask your question? It's a really good question.
Sure. So I know for a fact that currently there are a lot of restrictions on visas for F1, like student visas, as well as H1Bs post the MBA. So do you think that this year would be a good year to kind of apply, given that all of these will affect the acceptances as well for international students?
Well, I think the one thing it's not going to affect acceptances as nearly as much as application volume.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a very good year to apply because competition from people like you is probably going to be decreased. Now, the risk to you is that you are accepted, frankly, and then you can't attend for some reason. However, so far, the OPT program has not been affected at all by the recent changes to the H-1B visa program. So OPT allows you to stay in the United States and work for up to 3 years, provided your program is designated a STEM program. And I can't remember now, we have it on the website. Actually, maybe Carly, you could look it up. There's a blog post about STEM programs, STEM certified programs on the site. I believe Stanford either has concentrations that are STEM certified or the whole program has been STEM certified. I'm not sure at the moment, but again, Carly will link to that post and you can check there. And obviously check on the Stanford site itself. Stanford is STEM certified. Thank you, Muncie. As long as it's STEM certified, you have 3 years of OPT automatically granted to you according to current regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So that is not as, your employability, at least again, according to current regulations, is not going to be an issue. Getting a visa is an issue, but most of the schools are currently offering hybrid programs so that if you can't get a visa, you can still participate. And there's a lot of hope that we'll have a vaccine for COVID by 2021, early 2021. Obviously, I'm not a public health official, so I don't, I can't comment on how likely that is.
Yeah.
But if that comes true, then hopefully what you're going to see is a lot of people refraining from applying, especially international applicants, because of the bad news that's been coming out. Mm-hmm. And then you have a vaccine and you actually can attend and you will have had less competition in the application process. So I would say it's a good year to apply if the vaccine comes out and people can not only apply, but get the visas. And then the following year is going to be a much more competitive year for international applicants. And we're not even talking about the impact of the election and possible changes on that. So that's well beyond my pay grade, and certainly well beyond my crystal ball. Okay.
Right, but that was a great perspective. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the question.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. We have some more questions here. Oh, we really went over. Appreciate you sticking around. Okay, so we have chances in top schools, preferably in the USA, if we are currently unemployed, if there's a gap in the resume currently, does it get compensated by things like higher score, diversity and profile, et cetera, in application? That's also a very good question. It depends a little bit, two things are important if you're unemployed. Why you're unemployed, in other words, were you fired for cause? That's a major negative. Were you furloughed or laid off because of COVID as a part of some massive layoff that was going on your employer? That's not so big a deal, provided that you use the period of unemployment wisely. So what does wisely mean? Presumably looking for other jobs, perhaps volunteering, perhaps taking courses and improving your skills in particular areas. So, and also how long the layoff lasts. If the layoff is 2 years, it's a major negative. If it's a few months, again, if it's COVID related, that's not going to be a big shock or a major negative at this point. Okay. Now, Richard also has an interesting question. Richard, do you want to ask your question? No? Okay, then I will. No problem. Okay, Richard's question is, if you are reapplying, will your previous essay be reviewed? The notes are likely to be reviewed from the previous application, and there's no guarantee that they won't pull out the previous application, but you don't know for sure. So if the notes are something like, the essay was vague and blah, 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 the essay was vague or didn't answer the question or whatever they wrote, or, then they're going to probably see that and they're going to look for specificity and a good answer to their question this time around. Would they perhaps go back and look at it? Perhaps, but again, it's not so likely. I think they will look at the notes. They're more likely to at least look at the notes. What are some ways to compensate for a low GPA? I'm not going to go into that now, but Carly, you want to just post the URL for the 5 A's for your low GPA, and you can look at that. Kush asks, does accepted help in getting scholarships from B schools? The answer is yes, we do. We actually have somebody who's a specialist in scholarships. So not just for, scholarships in general, and some of our consultants definitely have that kind of experience. Okay. All right. So at this point, I've answered many questions. There's still a lot coming in. I'd like to share with you, I want to thank you for your attention. I want to share with you a thought, and then I have a question for you folks. The thought, there's a paradox inherent to acceptance at top business schools. It's great that you both fit in and stand out. Now, fitting in means that you belong to the target school in terms of your goals, your academics, your work experience, and your values, that you're going to be a valuable member of the school's community, and make them proud to have you in their community. Standing out, you need to be noteworthy in a highly qualified, intensely competitive applicant pool. You need to show that you're going to contribute distinctively, add a special something, and make the admissions committee members proud that they voted to admit you. Now, the 4 elements of the framework that we discussed at length in the webinar provide you with a structure. Let us, meaning accepted, help you with the implementation, that how that I mentioned earlier. Let me tell you about just one more client whose investment accepted paid off in spades. A couple of years ago, we worked with a fellow who had less than common work experience and strong stats, but he came from a very much overrepresented group in the applicant pool. He worked with Jennifer Bloom and today has referred many of his friends to Accepted. Here's what he wrote after his acceptance. Dear Jennifer, I got an acceptance from Stanford last night. Even as I wonder which one I want more between Stanford and Wharton, this is a dream come true. I'm not a great writer, and so I'll keep this short for fear of ruining it. Thank you. I don't have any new words to express the gratitude that is filling my heart. I hope all your other candidates find wings to their dreams. Now, this happy client followed the steps on the screen. His dream, and so many of Accepted's clients' dreams, have found their wings. So can yours. Get accepted. Now, you stayed for the webinar. I have a question. You've stayed for the webinar, the pitch, and the Q&A. You're clearly interested in what we have to say. Why are you hesitating to engage with Accepted and work with a consultant one-on-one? In the chat window, please. What's causing you to hesitate? You're very welcome. Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Arun. I guess we'll talk also. Why are you hesitating to engage with Accepted? Above budget fees. Okay. Anybody else? The cost. Okay. This was a great one. Thank you very much, Matthews. I look forward to talking to you also. The cost. Okay. The cost is an investment. Just like your application fees are an investment, your costs in studying for the GMAT are an investment. Frankly, your tuition is going to be an investment. And several people are saying this. But I want to point out that our minimum fee is $330. That's a little bit more, but not a lot more than the cost of an application. And you're going to send that application in, and it could just not be a very good representation of you. If you spend the $330, which is, our minimum 1-hour fee, you could get fantastic feedback that would make an enormous difference in the quality of your application. Okay, so that, we're not a cheap service. I completely acknowledge that. But certainly our minimum can pay off. And then the other thing I want to point out is you're going to spend thousands on the education itself. Even if you get scholarships, you're going to have to spend thousands, because the scholarships, again, as I said, are rarely a full ride. Don't you want to go to the best school you can get into? Isn't that going to pay off much, much more over your lifetime? Now, Thomas is asking, is there any real differentiation between Accepted and any other MBA admissions consulting service? Yes, our level of experience and our dedication. We've been in business longer, and certainly under the same management, longer than I think any other admissions consultancy out there, with 1 or 2 possible exceptions. On staff, you have about 200, close to 200 years of collective MBA admissions experience, even though we've only been in business for, a mere 26 years. So I think that experience really differentiates us. I think our expertise, we have many former admissions directors on staff, highly experienced MBA admissions consultants on staff. And the other thing I think that differentiates us is you work consistently with one consultant, barring unusual circumstances, okay? That allows that person who's already highly experienced and knowledgeable about MBA admissions to get to know you really well and be better able to advise you in telling your story. So I think that's another distinctive aspect of Accepted's approach. And the third one is dedication. Many of our clients, the feedback that I get is that the consultants were much more than just consultants, much more than just mentors, that they really became their friends, their advocates, their critics in the process. So I hope, Thomas, that answers your question. There will be, Matthews, there will be a Wharton webinar in the future. I don't remember the date, but I think it's going to be in August. Carly, do you have that date? Okay, any other reasons? I also want to point out that if you explore our services, there's two things I think that are not only distinctive about Accepted, but you're welcome. Make the cost more accessible. One is our refund fee. So if you buy our services, let's say you buy a 10-hour plan, right? That's $2,950. And you don't use it all, you can request a refund of unused time. You'll lose the multiple hour discount, but you still can get a good chunk of change back. If that's one aspect that I think is distinctive about Accepted, and I think it's testament to both our confidence in our service, our commitment to treating applicants fairly. And again, I think it also is one way that we keep the cost down, because the 10-hour plan has a built-in discount that saves you a lot of money. So that's another way that you can reduce your costs. And the final thing is you can start with 1 hour and then upgrade to any service that you want and get whatever discounts are built into those services. So you can try us out, see if there's value there for you that justifies the investment, and then upgrade to the service that you really, really want. So I hope that I've addressed, are there any other concerns that's causing you to hesitate? I'm looking at both the question window and the chat window now. So you can reply on whatever one you want. Okay, in that case, I'm just going to thank you very much. You've been a great audience. Thank you for your time and your attention. And good luck with your applications. Thank you so much. You're welcome.